Hi, it's Monday morning, and it says, what are we painting? And it says exactly the same thing it said on Friday, because on Friday I didn't get done what I was planning to do because the painting on this thing, the bottom of the car, did not go well. So over the weekend, I repainted parts of it, and I'll be unmasking this later. A little bit later in the stream because there's some other things I would like to work on before I get around to doing that. One of the things is this is the upper body, which goes like around it. And this had two parts to it. And I cemented them together. And here, I'll take the rubber band off. There we go. And there's a really nasty seam here. Yeah, the bottom. I'm feeling this with my fingers, and this bottom part here, and it looks black on my monitor. It's quite bright light green. I don't know why that is, but after it's put together, I can feel it with my fingers that the bottom part, okay, extends out. It's bigger. It's bigger than the top, and so that needs to be sanded down. And then after it's sanded, I'll see if there's still if there's a seam that needs to be filled in or not. So I'll do some sanding on that so that I can get ready to be primed for something in the future. Here's the seat. Well, you can't see it. There we go. The seat. I'm going to paint the back of it duraluminum. I don't know if one is going to be able to see any of the back once it's put in place. That's interesting. Huh. Okay, it goes like that. Okay, so what I'm talking about is that when you look at the real car, okay, it's red in the middle, and there's two bolsters here that are painted black. All right, and I'm thinking that seat doesn't have those. It doesn't have those at all. No, it doesn't. They're molded in. They're molded in here. So this is the top of the seat, and those are the two black bolsters. Well, that'll be interesting to get to paint those. Yeah. Looking at the instructions about how this is supposed to go together. Who knows? Who knows exactly how it's going to look? Of course, this has these circles in it, molding circles, but I'm hoping that won't be visible or it won't make a difference in the final product. So I'm going to paint this fairly early on. The back of this, whether it shows or not, it'll just be painted anyway. I'm going to sand down the seams on the front of the car here. And then these are the suspension and brake parts for the rear of the model. And I spent a lot of time on those on Friday trying to get them to look okay. And I knew there would be issues after they were primed. Okay. Because with the chrome, it was too hard to see, but these aren't rounded. They're just not. And then there's excess here. So that needs a lot of work. There's molding circles in there. Those were practically invisible. You can see them, the circles there. Those were essentially invisible when it was not primed. Looks like I got most of, but not all of the seams. The issue is that when this is assembled, that's going to be visible. And those circles are just wrong. So I'm going to have to fill those in and sand them down. So these parts are just taking a long time. This is weird. Okay, there's this lump, this edge here. It looks like excess plastic. It's not symmetric. Okay. You can see that. There's a little lump here. I thought that was part of the part. Okay. It looks like it's continuous with that, but on this one, it's on the other side. Okay. And it sticks way out. So my conclusion is that because this is like rounded there, that those bits are just excess plastic. So these parts will continue to take a lot of work. I need to round off the top here. You can see how non-circular they are. Fill in the holes and get rid of those little plastic blobs. I'm going to have to look at these again to make sure. Yeah, they're just not, it's just weird. Make sure that the mold marks are gone around the edges. A divot there for some reason. I knew these parts would be a problem when I was working on them because they just were a problem. But they are just as much of a problem as I thought they would be. So I'm going to be spending a fair amount of time today just shaping parts so that they're presentable and usable. And then I'll be unmasking this later on, and hopefully the inside will be okay. And then maybe I will then start to assemble here the parts of the front suspension. This is the instrument panel. I think it actually came out pretty good. What isn't on there is the little white pointers and things for the dials. Not raised up very high. I have a way of maybe trying to mark those. I might give that a try a little bit later too. So yeah, just stuff. I think I'm going to start by painting this on the inside. I think I'm just going to do that because, it's supposed to be relaxing painting with Dyson Dungeons. So what better thing to do than doing a little bit of painting? I'm going to paint it pure aluminium rather than just plain aluminium or aluminum. And yeah, probably 2 coats. I'm going to put this one aside because it's just going to be in the way. I'm doing some other things, so I'm going to just set that aside until it's time to do the unmasking, if I get brave enough later to do that. So, yeah, sew buttons. There's parts that'll be scraped, and those will be scraped, and then not the one I want. It's the one I want. The rest of this, the seat of this, is painted this red color that I use for the instrument panel. getting some coffee. I know it's 10 in the morning. You'd think, well, you've been up for a couple hours. You would think, huh? Day session go 4 hours, 4.5 hours. Only it was 3 hours. I'm just looking at the session time from Friday. I'm confused by that. Okay, well, let's mix up the paint, and I'm going to do a little bit of relaxing painting here. And then I'm going to do some sanding and shaping. And then like about halfway through, like around 11:30, I'll do the unmasking. And then I'll look at it and go, I don't know if I want to do anything more with this. So in between here, I'll make an effort to maybe try to, I'm muttering to myself, do the dials on the instrument panel. I have this white charcoal pencil, and I use this with success on the tires, and maybe it'll work on the instrument panels if it's raised high enough that I can just touch the raised parts and not the other parts that aren't raised. Now, I have spent a fair amount of time muttering on about racing in the 1950s and 60s because I did watch a lot of these races at the racetrack near where I lived, and just saw the evolution of it, especially the introduction of a lot of safety features, which was really important because racing was an incredibly dangerous thing. Hmm. I'm going to paint the edges of this red on the back, just in case it shows. This is the metal frame of the seat. Yeah, I don't need to overbrush it, do I? And I'll let that dry, and then I'll put a second coat on later. Watch the paint dry there. So I was talking about watching on Friday. I was talking about, which is what I'm trying to do now without much success, apparently. But on Friday, I was talking about the safety features for the spectators. And the people who are watching the race are actually quite a bit in danger because the catch fences were not that solid. Okay. But, there were just weird and dumb things like the person who waves the flag, green flag, the yellow flag, the black flag, now is way up above the track on a stand. Kind of, there's some exposure there. I suppose if there were just some incredible accident right in front of them, that a part could go flying up and hit them. But back in the day, if you see, you know, newsreels and things, footage, old races, the person with the flag would actually stand out on the track and wave the flag as these cars go tearing by. This, I mean, things that we just find inconceivable today. Just were a regular part of what racing was like. On road courses, old Formula One, you can watch this from the 1950s. There were people just sitting on the sides of hills with nothing between them and the track. Just nothing. If a car went out of control, and it did once or twice, they could go slamming into the crowd. The pits were not behind a barrier wall. They were right out on the track. And there were accidents that actually did happen, where a car would be coming into the pit and would hit a car that was already there. So the safety and its changes over time is probably one of the most significant things. 800 grit. I don't want to get 600. 800. Okay, so the issue here is, if you can see the seam, it's pretty obvious here, is that the bottom part here actually extends out past the top part. If I run my fingernail along it, it catches in that direction. But it's true in both directions, which means that the bottom here is just molded bigger. And so I need to sand that down so that the seam is not so obvious. And then go around the rest of this. There's like sprue sticking out here that needs to come off. Little bits of excess plastic right along here. Yeah, just quite a lot of work that needs to be done on this. I'm going to be using a needle file to get some of the major stuff off. There's a lump, flap of plastic here, but there's a lump here. I think you can see it. No, you can't. It's not on camera. There's a lump here of plastic from the molding process. When it pulled off the mold, it left a lump of plastic behind. I'm going to take off about 85% of that with the file, and then the rest of it with sandpaper. I'm going to use 600 grit, which is pretty aggressive for here. And then I'll be doing a lot of polishing. This body, what I discovered in painting the bottom of this, the part that might be unmasked if I feel brave enough to do it today, is that any little flaw in the plastic shows through the paint. Like this little scuff mark here, that will show through. So I'm going to polish as much of this as I can with this stuff, so that it is smooth as I can make it. I don't want to be doing it over the paper towel. It's my clean surface. Do it over this. I'm reluctant to unmask because it's like, okay, well, that was a week's worth of work. It may turn out to just be a disaster and have to be redone, or not. Sometimes it comes out okay. No, with the Apollo, it mostly worked out okay. Mostly. The other is that assembling the front suspension is just bizarre in a way. The attachment points, okay, the attachment points are these little spots here and here and here and here, and this like holds the suspension together. There's just hardly any place at all for the cement to sit. And as I'm looking at this, there's still chrome in the way. I'm still going to have to work at clearing that out, because I want to use the kind of model cement that, like I did here, that welds the parts together rather than like contact cement. Well, get started on this and see how it goes. As I'm doing this, you can see that this is scratching the surface and it's turning it a lighter color. And I need to keep doing that until you can see it here. See the darker gap between there and there? That means that this is higher and that's lower. And I just need to keep going at the bottom part here until it is all a uniform color. And then I need to spend a good deal of time polishing it with finer and finer grits of sandpaper. I have to say that, I've talked about this before. When I built this model when I was probably 14 or 15, this wouldn't have bothered me. Okay, it's cemented together. That's the way it is. I didn't do any painting, really. I left all the chromy, all shiny. And I'm sure that I built this whole thing in just a total of 4 or 5 hours over a weekend. Wow, that's really a lot of plastic. It needs to come off. But here I am, trying to make it look like an A minus, B plus kind of model. I'm not sure I'm going to do much better than that, because it's just presenting too many challenges in terms of prepping the parts and seams showing and tiny little contact points for the cement. It's just a lot of stuff that is challenges beyond my skill level. I can't imagine what the people who make these things so that they can show on the box top, so that they come out A plus. They do. They must have like unpaid interns or something sanding down these seams. Here, use this really fine sandpaper and sand down this seam so that it doesn't show. And come back in about half an hour or longer from now. Come back when it's all done and looks perfect. Nope, that's not right yet. So, go back at it. You can do better. just abusing the intern. If they had unpaid interns back then, I'm not sure if that was a thing then. Minimum wage summer help. That's probably what it was. I was that once. You have to be minimum wage summer help, working in a tool room at a place. This is almost an interesting story. Maybe I'll tell it. Kind of. There are interesting parts about the story anyway. Being after my freshman year of college, looking for summer work so that I could earn enough money to get through the second year. Managed to get a job in the tool room. Well, actually, the initial job was temporary help for doing their inventory. You had to do an inventory of everything once a year in the plant. So I guess they could pay taxes on it. So it was a room full of nuts and bolts and little connectors and sometimes larger pieces of metal, brackets and stuff that are in these bins. Sometimes one counted them. Okay, there's 13 of these and 25 of those, 47 of these. But then there are these bins, big bins of nuts and bolts and screws and things. Hundreds and hundreds of them. So one didn't count them individually. They were inventoried by weight. That was kind of interesting. Got on a scale and counted how many there were in, say, a pound, just to, because in the U.S., that's how we measured things, in pounds and ounces. So how many little screws are there in a pound? And then weighed the entire bin, okay, and divided that, did arithmetic. Arithmetic was actually used in real life. Believe it or not, that was a time when that happened. Used arithmetic to calculate how many screws were in the bin based on how much it weighed. And how many screws there were in a pound. So that was kind of interesting. Well, that only lasted for about a week. And then there was a job opening in the tool room. And apparently my arithmetic was good enough, and I knew, I impressed the powers that be by my ability to count things in bins, so that I got to work in the tool room, which was actually pretty interesting. The tool room is the place where they stored and sharpened all the drill bits and cutting tools for the machinery that they were using. Hi. The paint I'm sanding. These parts don't fit, right? So I'm sanding them down so that they kind of fit again. Sorry, I wasn't looking up. Yep, counting and dividing. It's pretty exciting work doing inventorying parts in bins. So in the tool room, they sent me in and they said, here, sharpen these drills. It's like, because the guy who ran the tool room was on vacation. So, and they needed the drill sharpened. I had no idea what I was doing. He said, well, here, put them in this machine, lay them flat so that the angle of the drill bit the very, very end of the drill bit is up against this, and then run it back and forth on this spinning wheel of grinding material until it's sharp. So I did that. On the small ones, on the small drills, that was just fine. But then there was a bigger one, a bigger wheel for these bigger drill bits. And when I say bigger, I mean these drill bits were the biggest one was 2.5 inches in diameter. Okay. This was not like your 1/4 inch drill that you would use to drill little holes as pilot holes for screws or something. I'll explain more if I remember to tell more of the story about why there were 2.5 inch drills. So I get this giant drill. I'd never seen a drill bit that big before. It was here. Use this bigger wheel. That made sense. Use the bigger sharpening wheel for the bigger drill. What they didn't tell me, and everybody had a big laugh about this. Oh, you're the new kid. This is what he did. He didn't know what he was doing. I said, no kidding. I didn't know what I was doing. Is that the grinding wheel had to be lubricated with this lubricating liquid. So there was actually a reservoir that pumped it down onto the grinding wheel and collected it at the bottom and pumped it back around again. Did they tell me about that? No. Did I know about it? No. I got the drill bit sharpened, but managed to scar the grinding wheel. So when the guy came back who ran the tool room, he looked at me and said, "Didn't I tell you about this?" And I said, no. They just said sharpen the tool bit, the drill bit. And he just harumphed and then resurfaced the grinding wheel. That was pretty cool. He was a very cool guy. He let me do almost all the work. What can you say? Because you've got somebody getting paid minimum wage who catches on to things pretty quickly and only ruined his grinding wheel once because he showed me how to use it correctly. He was kind enough to let me do almost everything while he sat around and watched me do it. So I was tool room assistant, but being paid as temporary summer help. I discovered that later. I'll just jump to the part of the end of the story. Is I discovered when I finished that summer that they hired a person to be the tool room assistant who was getting paid more than twice what I was getting paid to do the same job. So yeah, that was almost as good as being an unpaid intern. It was kind of an interesting summer though. They even gave me an hour of overtime, and I could come in on Saturdays. I guess that was kind of a privilege, actually, to come in on Saturdays, so I could earn, added 50% to my earnings. It's just 5 hours of overtime and a couple hours on Saturday. Because it was paid like double time. I got paid twice as much for those hours as just working regularly during the week. So this is one of those things where I can still see the line, okay? Can still see the line where the seam is, but can't feel it. I don't know if it's going to show. That won't even be able to tell until after it's primed. It pretty much disappeared back here. And I'm going to do this. It's right on an edge. There's comes together here. It should be like a straight thing instead of a ragged thing. The other thing they made me do, well, it was a big metalworking shop. What they made, this was really kind of interesting. What they made were car crushers. Okay, I mean you've probably seen pictures of these where these you put a car, the engine, the engines and seats and things are out. They kind of stripped it, but you put a body of a car in this thing, and it turns it into just a cube of metal. So that's what they made there. So they're working with, and everything was custom made. Because each piece, was made for a specific customer for a specific purpose. I'm just checking. Sometimes see, oh, that pretty much disappeared there. See how it looks after it's painted. So they're working with these gigantic pieces of metal, and because these machines are big and robust, so that's why they needed 2.5-inch drills, because sometimes they needed holes that big. There was one piece of metal, a round piece. It was like a sprocket kind of thing, where they were drilling. I think they were drilling like a dozen 1.5-inch holes. It was a circular piece like this, and all around the outside, or it was going to get bolted together. A car cube. They turned cars into cubes, and I worked in a place where they made the things that did that. It's kind of interesting. There was a lot of scrap metal, from the drilling and the lathing and the milling, because it was all made from, like I said, it was all made from scratch. They'd bring in big pieces of steel, sometimes brass, depending on what component is being made. Then they'd mill it down or drill it or did whatever they needed to do to it to make it into the shape that they needed for the part they were working on. So I was this unpaid intern, well, not exactly. That was the minimum wage summer help. Got to be the minimum wage summer help, and they said, well, kid doesn't know anything. We'll just make him do all the filthy stuff that nobody else wants to do. So I got to do things like empty out the scrap metal from like the machinery, the lathes and things. So there are all these really sharp-edged pieces of metal. Use like a pitchfork to scrape them into a wheelbarrow. And then they somehow needed to get from the wheelbarrow into a big bin. They recycled all the metal, right? So it would go up into a big bin. In order to get it into the bin, there was a crane. There were several overhead cranes the crane operators had a pretty good gig. They pretty much just sat up in their cranes all day, and every once in a while they needed to move something from one place to the other. But for the most part, they didn't have anything much to do other than watch all the people working on the floor below. So got this crane and got a metal strap, not a metal strap, a canvas strap, hooked it onto the hook of the crane and around the bottom of the wheelbarrow, where the axles of the wheels were. And the idea was, this is what they said, is this, I'm going to lift it up and you tip it up into the bin. So this crane lifted up this wheelbarrow full of scrap pieces of metal. So it was above the edge of the bin. And when it was up high enough, and say, okay, tip it now. So it was practically above my head. I had to tip it up. And, I was the new kid, right? So what did they do is it wasn't quite far enough. It wasn't quite far enough over the bin so that when I tipped it up, almost the entire contents of the wheelbarrow just spilled on the floor. Everybody had a good chuckle about that except me, because then what I got to do was I got to clean up all scrap metal from the floor and put it back in the wheelbarrow. This time, though, they did they lifted it up so that it did go over the edge of the bins, so that when I tipped it up, it went in. Oh, yeah. Kid learned how to do it. So when I wasn't sharpening drills, I was tipping scrap metal into bins. There were all sorts of little tests like that. There was, like I said, there were these overhead cranes. Some of them were really big, where somebody would sit up in a cab, and move things around. There were some others that were much smaller, and they were controlled by a control box that dangled from a cable. And so the operator was on the floor. Okay. Said, "Hey, you kid." Didn't quite say it that way, but pretty close. You know how to operate this? No. Okay, well, there's buttons on this control box. This one makes it go up and down. This one makes it go back and forth. This one makes it go in and out. Okay. So you could move the crane, the hook up and down, and move the crane around. Move these pipes. Stack them up over here. It's like, oh, sure, right. But I actually did that. And I only banged myself a couple of times. Nothing started bleeding or anything, but that was that. So yeah, you worked with metal workers too? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if you've got machines or you're doing it by hand. It's like this, this is just plastic, but in order to get it to look right, it takes forever. In this case, part of why it takes forever is just, trying to not scar up the plastic too much. Because these differences, see the difference in color there, shows up. Hmm. Were you doing it by hand? Like filing it by hand? Or were you using a machine like a lathe? Yeah. And the thing about the metal is that, the stuff comes off and it's like razor sharp, the edges. Really, it really can make a mess of you. Yeah. Wow. It doesn't come out perfectly. I don't think that I think the seams will still show just a little bit. Maybe. I want to put some, it pretty much disappeared here. It's really good. On the other side, you can still see a white line, but it's so hard to tell whether that's something that's going to show or not. Whether it might just be, the cement dissolved the plastic, right? And it's a different color. Sometimes you just can't tell until after it's painted, and then you just get to paint it again. Uh-huh. That was the first one. It's people think that like woodworking and metalworking are really similar, and in some ways, I guess they are, but they just feel very, very different. The one thing I learned is like the odor of hot metal. That first cube. So you pointed to a perfect sphere. That's pretty funny. You pointed to the perfect sphere and said, "No, that was the very first thing I did." Okay, that was pretty clever. So what were you doing in the metal shop or in the factory? Was this like a temporary job or one of your first jobs or something you tried out? Curious about the backstory about how you ended up doing that. Ah, okay. Oh, okay. That's right. You said you did it. You had a chance to do everything in the plant. That's a really interesting thing. Is to start work at a place and it's what do you do here? Well, let's show you. And you go around and you actually get to do everything that's done in the plant. I like that idea. That doesn't really happen much around here. It's like, this is your job, do your job, don't ask questions, don't get in the way. Yeah. Then I get to spend an hour, sanding around on this, trying to make the seams disappear with, maybe it'll be successful, maybe not. We'll find out. I'm guessing when I prime this that I'll end up having to do a little bit more work on these seams. They're about, they're kind of going away. Like here it went pretty well. But I do know that it's going to end up looking, no matter what, it will end up looking better than it would if I didn't. And there was just this ridge across the whole model, which is what there would have been otherwise. Oh, electrical work as well. What did they do at the plant? Are they manufacturing things? I mean, they must have been if they're doing electrical and oh, Henkel. Okay. The side of this car is coming along much better than the right side. Still, as I move this, I can still see a tiny, shiny line where the seam is. It's invisible. Oh, okay. No, I understand then why you'd be working in chemistry. What were the metal parts for? For the cleaning equipment, maybe? Okay. Okay. So doing maintenance on the machines did it, maybe even made your own spare parts. That's interesting. You know, that just makes sense now that would be the case. So the electric would be that too. Yeah, I know. The trend now is to outsource so much stuff, is not do things on one zone in the company, but pretty much have somebody else do everything. But when it comes to things like maintenance, you want it done right. So I can see why it would make sense to do it in house. Okay, that's going to have to be polished out. Back here, this is kind of a delicate spot. This is a piece of sprue, but it's right where a bunch of rivets are. So I'm going to try to not mar the detail that's molded in. Sand it from the bottom here. Change it. Yeah, sometimes I'll have to tell this story about this. Uh, that's a that's a good point. There's safety features for pieces of machinery like that. And sometimes people will just bypass them. I don't know why they do that, but I've seen that happen. Oh, okay. This has got to come off. The machines, heavy machines like punch presses. Oh, see, did you find any safety risks? Yeah, that's important. So one other summer job I had, there's a place that had punch presses where these were things where you put a piece of sheet metal down, and then it would a big, well, it was like a mold, like for automobile parts and seat bottoms and things. So the sheet metal is flat, and you want it to be shaped like the bottom of a tractor seat, say. So you'd put it in this punch press, and it would press down with thousands of pounds of, a lot of force because you're shaping sheet metal. Ah, okay, even taking pictures. So it was possible if one wasn't careful to have one's hand in the press when it came down, in which case your hand was gone. Okay, it would just crush it into oblivion. Um, so the machines were set up so that press wouldn't press unless two buttons were pushed simultaneously. It's kind of like nuclear launching, right? You had to turn two keys at the same time to launch a missile. You're supposed to push two buttons at the same time, one with each hand, to make sure that your hand wasn't in the way. Now, why would your hand get in the way? Well, people were being paid by the piece, and so they wanted to go as fast as they could. And if they could, like, use one hand to put the piece of metal in and the other one to push the button, they could pump out more pieces. And so the inspectors had to check every now and again because the machine operators would rig their machines so that they only had to push one button, and that was extremely dangerous. Okay. Whenever you've got moving parts, you've got danger. I mean, it just is. It just happens that way. Having one's arm ripped out is not a pleasant thing. I would recommend against that if you have an opportunity to avoid. But I could see how that could happen, is you could get something get stuck there like that. So were you able to identify that and get it fixed before anybody got injured? That makes sense. I mean, it was in their interest to work safely and not get injured on the job. So it's good that you had that experience. At this place I worked at, it was the workers who actually did the things that were not safe. Again, because they made more money that way. So there was an incentive built in. It wasn't a very good incentive, really, was it? I mean, when you think about it, if you have an incentive built in to work. Okay, they needed to rebuild the case. That's why you had such a big machine shop, so that you could actually do that right in-house. Okay, that all makes sense. that's not too bad. There's a little bit of visible, some little tiny bits of visible marks for the seam, but not much. Yeah. I don't know. Let's get an account in here and see which is a better deal. How much will an arm cost us? How much does a part cost us? In this country, that actually wouldn't be a joke. There would actually be somebody probably doing the arithmetic to decide, what which one would cost the company less. Sorry about that, but it is kind of how things are here in the States. Got to have priorities. Well, I'm going to prime this and see if I can still feel that, though. If I can feel it, I'm going to be able to see it. I'm not sure what that is, whether there's like a little gap there. But no, I don't feel it. No, right in the front, right in the front here, there's a notch. That was a really good, that company sounds like they were really a good place to work. The place I worked at, surprisingly, they were doing metal. They had these big drill presses and lathes and mills. The mills are for flattening metal. Okay, lathes are for turning different round things, round bits. But the mills were for shaping flat surfaces. Oh, no. Putting out the nose here. I'm spend a lot of time just smoothing out this plastic, and then it gets painted. And if the paint job is a mess, then it has to be redone. I tell myself that this was worth the effort. Okay, the special safety knife was less safe than the regular knife, but that's why you try things, right? That's how you find out. It's polishing up pretty well. Need to try to polish this bit back here where I took the screw off. The very I like somebody like that who takes their job really seriously. And if you're ordering new tools, to make sure that they work before you order a bunch of them. That was very important because it saved the company, I'm sure, a lot of money. Not just, making sure that they weren't ordering parts that weren't going to work, but ordering parts that were going to keep their workers safe. This, yeah, I don't know what to do about that. I think I'm going to have to fill that in, actually. What is up with that? My hand is shaking like that. I'm going to let that dry. I actually should be able to sand that down by the end of this stream, because this is supposed to dry pretty quickly. Yeah. Well, that one is, yeah, I could see that. You immediately rejected. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is scrap now. I'm going to cut some new stuff off later. So this is ready for priming, and, well, almost. I have to sand that little bit down when it dries. And then after it's primed, I will see what yet needs to be done on this. Painting this is going to be tricky. There's a yellow stripe that goes across here, flares out, and actually goes inside the nose, so that there's yellow inside the nose. Right? You carry them around inside your pockets. That could be dangerous. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to put a second coat of this paint on now, just so I can do a little more painting. Yeah, I know, the safety officer, right? You go, how did you cut your hand? Well, I was trying to make things safe. He did. I mean, he had a cut hand, but in the process managed to probably protect a whole lot of other people from having a damaging injury. I squeezed out way too much paint. Well, for a part that didn't need to be painted at all, it came out pretty well. Can watch that paint dry too now. Oh, that's pretty good. It didn't happen in a knife fight. Well, in some ways, the knife won the fight. You could kind of say that I did have a knife fight and the knife won. Well, what have I accomplished? I've been doing this for a little over an hour, and I've got some paint on here, and I sanded this down, and the seams might not show depending on how it looks after it's painted. And it seems to be all I've gotten done in an hour. But I got to talk about a machine shop, and so has Aman. Yeah, that knife needed to go back to the manufacturer of that knife and say, nope, your product is not good. I never put it there. Why did I put it there? Well, it was out of the way, but not in a helpful way. Okay, I'm going to cut some more pieces of sandpaper off because I'm going to be needing them. Yeah, this is looking like one of these typical days when nothing gets done on the model, right? It's visible. So these parts are really a mess. There's little bits of plastic that apparently that I thought maybe were part of the model but aren't. That needs to come off. These need to be made round. We're actually working with a, yeah, very slow. Holes. The hole isn't even big enough for the part that's going to be going in there. After I'm done with, it just looks like it was badly made. I hope it holds together when it comes time to put it together. Probably need to reprime this. Almost certainly need to reprime this when I'm done. Okay, on this side, this is going to show. There's excess plastic or probably chrome, bits of the chrome plating here that I couldn't see initially. Everything was so shiny I couldn't see the excess chrome bits. That has to come off. This thing here, this has to come off. And then I'm going to fill in these circles and sand those down because they just do not belong. And file this down pretty much to where it needs to be. This whole thing will need to be sanded and filed after the putty sets in on the holes, the circles. So the chrome, once again, the chrome plating just really gets in the way of everything. Yeah, the paint doesn't adhere to it. The primer kind of pretty much does, but the other paints sometimes don't at all. They mask flaws, very badly masked flaws in the plastic. And if I'd left it just chrome plated, they probably would have been mostly invisible, but it would also look really stupid because the car itself, the real race car, had no chrome anywhere. It's a race car. You polish the metal to reduce air resistance, and you don't chrome plating on things. I'm going to take a look at these through the head magnifiers, because I want to make sure that the seams ran right along the edges here. And these parts are actually quite visible when the model is put together. Okay, save that until I file down the filler in the holes. You can see the circle there. It's one of those really annoying, why when they molded the parts do they put little circles in? Put these on real just to see the edges, because once it's painted metallic, the seams, the mold seams really are visible. Seems pretty decent. It's just a lump of chrome plating there. That very much distorts the part. right? So made almost totally invisible progress here so far today. I'm going to fill in these holes, and then on Wednesday I'll sand those down and then get them ready to be primed again. And I had a toothpick here. I should have saved it. That I had whittled down to be a spatula. Maybe it's this one. There. That fell. All the way to the floor. So working in this machine shop was really pretty fun. Oh, cool. That's right. It's Monday. You get to have your session. Now you must be pretty excited about having it happen. You're going to look for you're going to be looking for the arsonist. Do I have that right? If I'm remembering that correctly? Huh. You finished, you had a one shot. Okay. That sounds like fun. Okay, well, yeah. That's a mess. An official mess. You tried to get the cat back home. How did that go? Oh, might look at. I guess it didn't go that well then, huh? Killed in the cat. These parts can go up here where I'm not working on them. I said I was going to do some unmasking at about 11:30. Oh, okay. What was the magic part of the magical creature? Okay. So it became pretty unpredictable. Oh, okay. It sounds like that was actually pretty fun. I'm going to take a look at this and try to decide. Anyway, okay, well, it's not too bad. It gives the impression of them. It gives the sense that there's like some dials or something on these. And without my head magnifiers on, it looks pretty decent. So I'm going to call that done. I have a pile of trash that needs to be cleaned up. Um, Before the unmasking, I'm going to take a real quick break, another one of those 3-minute kind of bio breaks. And I need to get some clean wash water for the brushes. So I'm going to be back. I'm not going to put the break sign up at all. You can look at the parts here. You can see how little I've accomplished in an hour and a half again today. And I will be back in just a couple of minutes. See you real soon. Okay, I'm going to. There's the part. that got painted many times, twice. Put these brushes aside. These brushes are for the seat. These parts need to just dry. That needs to set. Well, it's either going to be okay or it's not. And the only way to find out is to take the tape off and see what I've got. God is not not being able to get the tape off. Seriously, it pulled the part. It broke the part. That that adhesive is not adhering. No, I don't think I want to mess with it. Mine came out pretty well. Oh, there's a mess there. I'm gonna have to do some touching up there. You know what happened, but it wasn't good. Hmm. That should have been painted green. I'm gonna have to try to touch that up with the green paint. I'll see if I can do that. Well, this isn't awful, but it's not terribly good. This is going to go over like this. Okay. So I'm not too worried about these edges. Um, this needs to be cleaned up a little bit. Well, okay. Part of what I'm unhappy about, okay, is right along the edge here. You can see some silver, and that's what I was trying to avoid because that's going to show when these parts are put together. This side came out pretty much okay. So I'm going to try to fix this and this. And I was hoping not to, but I don't have a choice. So the way this works is that I get one of these containers, which I have many. and it's not the best thing in the world to do, but it needs to happen, is that I spray some paint in here and then just run it along the edge here where it's going to show. It just looks bad, and along here, and hope that the result. See, this I can clean up. This I can clean up. That edge, that ragged edge, has to be fixed. So I'm going to give this a go here. To be kind of careful with this because it dissolves itself really differently. This is not. This isn't the acrylic. Okay, I think that'll work. Like I said, I'm not too worried about that part. I can do that touch up. Dang it. Oh, man. That was so stupid. Beyond belief stupid. Sorry. Just stuck my finger in the wet paint. Seriously. I had gotten it so it looked pretty decent, and then just stuck my finger in it. Just, oh, just. Oh, how was that even possible? Wow. Okay, well, what you saw was an example of, holy cow, that was really stupid. Holy cow. I really said that, didn't I? Okay, well, there. Now I need to try to clean this brush. This isn't going to work. Well, you got to see me do. Oh, that came out okay. That looks okay, and then messed it up by sticking my finger in it. That was a classic, totally amazing example of how to not do things right. Okay, I'm gonna have to use the lacquer thinner on this. I need to put that over so I don't keep messing it up. Wow. really. That was impressive. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's really hard to keep the stream like PG-13, right? It just really is hard to keep it. Even at the PG-13 level. That was an example of it being very hard to keep it at that level. Okay, so what will need to happen here is I'll need to clean this up there and there just a little bit, because this part will fit over that and mostly cover, but not completely cover it up. And the assembly, if I were going to do any assembly today at all, it would be attempting to fit this part in here like that. These tiny little points here and here, that's the only contact point that I can see to go here and here and here and here. There and there and there and there. To hold this on. I don't see, I tried to test fit this many different ways, and that's how it seems to go. I don't understand how they expect that to stay put. I don't see any other place where it can go. Like it doesn't go there. The instructions are just not helpful at all in terms of identifying how this is supposed to be. And then the instrument panel, there's no location for it. It's just supposed to go in here somewhere. Just somewhere. It doesn't even identify where it's supposed to go. Well, given how badly that went, okay, given how I almost had a total disaster, and mine still, as far as I know, I am going to not attempt to assemble today. That's why I said maybe assembly. I did unmask though, and it was mostly okay. I just have some places that need some touching up, not too terribly many. I don't know where that came from. Um, Putty's drying. This needs just a tiny bit of sanding here, and then this can be primed. And then this is going to sit for a good long time before anything happens to it. Okay. Just to let you know, I did this just so I could get these seams gone. And that might take a couple of iterations before they're done. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint the seat. I can't mess that up too much, I don't think. Well, I probably can. I'm sure I can find a way to do that. I'm going to be painting the edges Okay, because it's already on here and I can do that. And then I'll and I'm going to grab it on the wet paint. I'm going to grab the wet paint and flip it over like this. What a bad idea. Okay, this is how I'm going to do this. I have made a decision. Is the bottom can't be seen because it's on the bottom. I'm lifting this up so that I can put this on here and get to the sides. So here, I'm painting all of this red and including the edges along the back, but I can do that because I just put it together like this. Okay, I'm still trying to recover from, I can't believe I stuck my finger in the wet paint. Regular viewers of this, or even if you've only seen it once, would not have been surprised by that event. Okay, there it is. I did. I dropped a thing on the floor. Get myself back together here. Get the brushes. I'm going to do some relaxing painting, maybe. I would pick this up and put it in the box so it was out of the way, but I know that if I pick it up, it'll just make a mess of something. On Wednesday, I'll be going back to that and trying to assemble the front. It has to be done at some point. I need to just say, okay, I need to put this together somehow. And begin to assemble the front suspension. What I really would like to have done today, I'm just not feeling brave enough to do that, is to put the upper A-arm across the front here so that the cement would have set, nicely set for Wednesday. It was going to take multiple coats. Now, one of the cool things about this machine shop I worked at, where they made car crushers and other gigantic industrial equipment, is everything had to be made. Each thing was unique. What did I do? Touch that? Look. Once again, something was sort of nicely painted until it wasn't, because I managed to stick my fingers in. Just by being there, just being in the vicinity of paint. Get a second coat on that yet today. I've got an hour. Oh, okay, so what should I do here? I have to wait for paint to dry. This is ready to be primed, and I need to put it. I just know that's going to show. I don't know what to do about that. This side is really quite good. I mean, really quite good. Side. Oh, let's see what it looks like when it's primed. It might, like I said, that might just be a line, not because there's an opening there, but because it's just discolored from the cement. I won't know until time comes. Wish I had someplace safe to put this somehow, but I don't even want to touch it. Okay, what I'm going to do next is why not? Okay, it's way out of order, but eventually has to be done. Is these bits here are air covers that go over the velocity stacks. Okay, the two halves are supposed to be cemented together. Sort of, but not quite alignment pins. These are really badly done. And again, they're not supposed to have seams showing, right? So what I'm going to do is, in an effort to actually get these parts together, and they're going to take a lot of sanding when this is done. I can just tell. Is the cement isn't going to work at all. Excuse me, with the chrome plating here. So the best thing to do is rub them on sandpaper and make the chrome plating go away. I'm going to use the 400 grit. There's two sets of these. I've kept the parts together. What's this? Okay. And eventually the chrome plating will have come off like that. This might as well wait until after the cement is done. Yeah. The chrome plating came off pretty quickly. And then I'll cement them together. Probably put a clothespin on them to clamp them, even though it might push the parts apart a little bit. That's not coming off. No, there it is. That's just dust. Yeah, this is going to be one of these things where I get cement on my fingers, and it just will be messy. It'll just be messy. Like I said, this is way out of order. This is one of the last things that gets attached to the vehicle once it's mostly done. But I had the parts out. They need to be cemented. They need to be sanded down, probably filled in, and then sanded again. So, even though if I'm getting ahead of myself on that, little wasting time. And I think what I'll do then, since I'm not going to be doing assembly of the suspension like I thought I would, that's going to end up taking probably an extra stream. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'll try to get all the parts to fit together. It'll be a little frustrating. I'm going to be grumbling when I do it. So I want to be fresh in the beginning of the stream before I start doing all sorts of grumbling about how difficult it is being. But it's kind of a delicate thing. Parts need to fit together really well. The contact points are really tiny. There's the opportunity to get cement all over the painted surface, and I need to not be in the last 45 minutes of a stream to be doing that. So I'm going to cement these together, and knowing that they're going to take an awful lot of work later on to be presentable. Just even knowing that, I can do that near the end of the stream here. And then I put a second coat of red on the seat. Flip things around. I'm going to sand that little bit down, and then this can be primed so I can inspect the seams on Wednesday. Yeah, sparingly. Cement is supposed to be sparing, but it's oozing out way too fast. Well, I haven't had it be this bad before in terms of pouring out. Yeah, it's just getting everywhere. Probably should have used a toothpick, but I didn't. So now I have to figure out how to get these parts together without getting cement all over my fingers. Try this. The chrome plating gets so much in the way of being able to see what I'm doing. They're very shiny. This is very, very shiny. Yeah, I'm getting little bits of cement on my fingers on the chrome plating. But that doesn't matter because most of the chrome plating is going to have to come off. I get them as lined up as I can so that the amount of sanding is minimized. I'm going to try this. What I'm hoping is that the parts stay more or less lined up. At the moment, it's less than more. Good thing I'm not leaving it chromy because I'm significantly marring the chrome. But that's okay because, like I said, it needs to mostly come off. Clamp these again. And as we say in our D&D show, let's handle that in post. It doesn't really happen, but it's one way of saying, well, you can deal with a mess later on somehow. And is it taking me like 20 minutes to glue these little pieces together? The glacial pace. The glacial pace of old guy trying to put things together without any eye-hand coordination. Whoa, okay. And it's one way for them to go together. That was not particularly good. It was actually pretty not good, but there. Well, the shininess just makes it so difficult to see anything. Yeah, this would be a challenge to get it cleaned up. I don't want to lose the little rivet marks on the ridges. So the sanding, when the sanding of this comes down to getting rid of the seam, I have to be careful about not sanding off the parts that I don't want sanded off. That made sense, didn't it? Don't do what you don't want to do because it'll make a mess of the thing you're trying to do. Yeah. Have to be flattened. I'll just, it's better to clamp this, and to get the cement to fill in the gap as much as possible than it is to not do that. So there, it's done. Two clothespins, clamping things. Yay. Um, yeah, I can show you. These are the parts that I haven't put on that need to be put on that I will probably attempt to put on Wednesday. And I think I'm happy with how the dashboard came out. I'm looking at it and I'm seeing, you know, there's infinitesimal tiny little flaws, but trying to fix them will make a mess. But I'm not trying to fit these today because I had to do several touch-up paintings on the body of the car. And that's what I'm going to do. I want to get this in the box. I'm going to do this. I just want to get it out of the dust or the potential dust between now and Wednesday. I don't want to look at it again until Wednesday, so I'm going to cover it up. There, it's in the in-process box. These are getting clamped. Wednesday, I'll be doing a bunch of sanding on these. That'll be messy. It'll be fun to watch being messy. And I'll be sanding this, so that'll be messy. But then those will be ready to be primed. I suppose I could just wait to prime this until I do the rest of those too. It'll waste less paint. So I'll just put that in the pile of things to be done. And then I will spend the last half hour of this stream. I'm going to put a second coat of red paint on the seat and then pull some more parts out. It looks like I'm getting a whole lot of, prepping and painting and not very much putting togethering. And that's fair. That is what's happening. There's not much putting togethering happening. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it'll just like all come together suddenly. Maybe it'll just come together suddenly during one of these streams, and people will go, "Whoa, wow, there was some putting togethering. How about that?" One can begin to imagine that happening. You have to you use your imagination. As well, guess I need to second coat these edges. Let your imagination go wild and begin to think that you're seeing parts of the car come together. Well, Wednesday, I really do need to work on the front suspension. At some point, assembly does need to happen. I really don't know how it's going to go. when I test fit some of the parts, they didn't fit very well. There's very small, very, very small contact points for the cement. There's a lot of potential bad things happening. It'd make it kind of an exciting stream. Keep messing with this because there's a spot there. Right. I can watch that paint dry. I'm still trying to recover from having stuck my finger in the touching up on the side of the car where I had gotten it and it looked really good, and then I messed it up. I will survive that. Pretty sure. Oh. Okay, I'm gonna just sand this bit down here. Use some of this fresh 800 grit. And what am I doing? Where is my sanding block? There it is. There was a tiny little nick here, and I just filled it in with that putty, which is supposed to be dry by now. Broke right off. That wasn't very helpful at all. It didn't stick. And there's a definite nick there that needs to be filled in. That was disappointing. Okay, well, that's not getting done then. What I need to do then is I'm going to go with this stuff. It's a little bit harder to work with. It dries really hard, but it should do the job. It adheres better. I've used this before. It works pretty well, but it dries really very hard. And so sanding it is a little bit of a challenge. I think that's all I need. This takes a while to set, so it's not going to be sanded until. Yeah, I was thinking of sanding this and then priming it tomorrow, but no, that has to set. So this will get sanded on Wednesday. These will get sanded on Wednesday. These covers will get sanded on Wednesday. This will just go into the in-process box once the paint dries. And between now and then, well, let me just pull some more parts out so I can complain about how badly done they are and how much the chrome is in the way. I think I'd like to do that. Oh, well, at least that didn't hurt anything, I don't think. What I'm going to take off is the exhaust. Okay. I'm going to use my little saw here. And I might even go ahead and take care of once this is primed. I'm going to be painting it yellow, and I've actually got the paint for it. But this has sorts of mold marks on it. It's just altogether not good. Oh, there's tiny little rings. Terrific. These tiny little rings, these things here, are supposed to be cemented on to hold the front wheels on without keeping them from turning. That's going to be a trick, especially since it's got all that chrome plating on it. Wow. Oh, these are the side mirrors. Of course, the side mirrors have holes in them. That's authentic. I was saying this place I worked at made these gigantic car crushing machines. Okay. And all the parts, a lot of the parts had to be made from scratch. And they were gigantic. So one of the things, this really impressed me, is they had to make their own nuts and bolts because these were like 4-inch in diameter, 4-inch in diameter bolts like that. You just don't go to the hardware store, and pick those up. They just don't exist. And so they had to make their own bolts and their own nuts on the lathe. So they get a chunk of metal, a big stock chunk of metal, and again, it's really hard to tell where the sprue is and where the part is. Something on here is actually supposed to stick to something else. Well, there's a big one and a little one. Okay, that makes sense because the right and the left are different. The instructions are not at all clear about how these things fit. It looks like they actually get attached to the engine block somehow, which hardly makes sense. So it was the machine shop had templates for these things so that the lathe operator could set up the lathe to cut the grooves, the spiral. Really, that was pretty impressive to have the lathe cut the spiral grooves of a bolt. Just managed to do it somehow. It was really pretty cool. None of these parts are going to fit. Yeah, they're little pins that are supposed to fit in the holes. And the chrome plating makes the pins too big and fills in the holes. We'll see that on Wednesday when I attempt to put the front suspension together. What you'll see then is that pins don't fit in holes. So the pins will need to be sanded down and the holes will need to maybe be cut out, opened up with a tiny little drill bit. Yeah. Look at these. Itsy bitsy little parts. The instructions say, move slowly and carefully. These parts are hard to fit together. No kidding. Maybe next to impossible to fit together. These mirrors are really sad. Okay. I mean, it's nice that they did them, but Why do they have dimples? Look at that, dimples right in the center of the mirror. I just, they're supposed to, if anything, they're supposed to be concave, not with dimples in them. So I'm going to have to fill those in and sand it down and try to paint it. The mirrors are supposed to be really shiny, so I have some chrome paint. I'm going to try to make them shiny as I can. I would like to just leave the chrome plating on the mirror, but mirrors don't have dimples. So rather than have shiny dimples, I'm going to see if I can't fix that. These retaining rings have me worried. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. The instructions here for the front when you finally get around to putting the wheels on. It was fitting front wheels, cement the wheel retainers. Those tiny little things to the spindles. Do not get cement between the spindle and the wheel. So somehow this front wheel goes on to the spindle, okay? And that tiny little ring is supposed to be cemented on the inside, but to not get it on the spindle so that the wheels are supposed to rotate. And that, I don't know how I did that when I was young. There must have just been cement everywhere. It must have been a horrible mess. Okay. Well, let me get the file and the sandpaper out so I can complain about this. I'd like to get this one going. I want this to be yellow. I want it to look like it should actually look instead of chrome. The exhaust was definitely not chromed. I'm going to try to get this done so that on Wednesday I can get it to the point where it can be when I start doing priming on these pieces here. Be doing that on Thursday after Wednesday's stream. Maybe that's what I'm aspiring to. Maybe that's I should say. I'm hoping that maybe I can get around to doing it then. I'd like to do this at the same time. I would like to put the exhaust painted yellow the way it should be into the done box. Yeah, this is really crappy. These springs will be interesting to paint because I want to paint them dark on the inside. These are springs over shocks, okay? Or they're just springs actually, and they should be painted dark with a light. The high parts are supposed to be light and the low parts are supposed to be dark. So that's what I'm going to try to do. A lot of this chrome has to come off. I'm going to use I guess I'll use the 600. No, I'm going to use the 800 grit. I want to scar it up as little as possible, even though it's going to be painted a flat color. Okay, which doesn't show the scuff marks quite as much still. These screw bits are really nastily, they're just in the wrong place, you know. Probably could have filed that down a little further. You can see where the sprue bit is, the green spot there, and the silver around it. That all has to be the same, not silvery color. So I just need to keep grinding away at that. Get a little impatient here. You need to worry away at that with the sandpaper until it is a uniform light green color. Take a while. But this is something that I think I'm mostly capable of doing late in the stream when things can go wrong. And I'm doing this instead of something delicate like trying to put on the upper A-arm on the front suspension, which would have been, it would have ended in tears if I had attempted to do that. It would have been just as bad as sticking my finger into the paint, the touch-up paint on the side of the body. Maybe even harder to fix. Spot. This is going to look very, very different once it's painted yellow. Okay, so along the side here is a little raised area where the mold came together and left a ridge. In this case, a very significant one. So the other, going back and talking about the machine shop, right? So they made their own nuts and bolts, like 3-4 inch in diameter bolts to bolt these gigantic pieces of metal together for this car crusher machine. So it was really kind of fascinating to watch these pieces of material take place. You know, to see a cylindrical piece of steel turned into a bolt like that, and to see that, you know, and then to carve a nut with the threads on the inside of it. Not an easy thing to do, and to have them actually fit together. That was a fascinating part of the job. Emptying wheelbarrows full of scrap metal into bins was not that much fun. It wasn't awful. After that first one, I never spilled it again. I'm sure that the people in the shop were quite disappointed in that, to not having me dump the little scrap metal all over the floor and then having to clean it up. That was very amusing for them to watch when that happened the first time. The other thing is that they're working. Everything was just giant. Okay, so if you're putting some pieces together, and you need to have like the bolt holes line up, right? You might take a mallet and hit the pieces with the mallet to line them up, just to get them to move a little bit. But imagine, you've got the same problem, except in this case, the pieces of metal might weigh a couple tons each, right? So there's somebody with a mallet, even if you had a sledgehammer, smashing against it was not going to make a difference. It wasn't going to move them. So this actually did happen. They needed a really, really big hammer, in order to nudge these pieces together. So they made one. What they did, this is a true thing. This is what they did, is they had this overhead crane, guy sitting in the crane seat, and it's up there, 30 feet from the floor. Is they took a block of metal. This thing was probably like 2 foot by 3 foot by 1 foot. Yep, you're beginning to imagine what happened here. Is they hung it from a strap, and the crane operator used it by very deftly moving the crane back and forth as a hammer. It's gigantic. I got to watch this and say, hey, everybody come and watch what's happening here. Is this going to work? I don't know. There's no other way to do it. Let's give it a try. An operator was very confident and very, very gently, with this thing that probably weighed the better part of a half a ton, very gently nudged the parts together by tapping them, by moving the crane back and forth and just swinging this big chunk of metal like a hammer. It was pretty impressive. Everybody applauded and said, well, yeah, what a good job, crane operator, right? And it was really very well done. Kind of fascinating to watch that happen. And then these giant machines needed to be moved, right? One of them, and this happened before I was there, but they had railroad tracks in the building. Okay, railroad tracks came into the building, and it was, why are there railroad tracks that come into the building? Well, one of the things they built had to move by rail, and there wasn't a rail car that would work. So they built a rail car on the tracks inside the building. They really did this, and then built the piece of machinery that needed to be moved onto the railroad car that they built. It was actually a really cool place. They offered me a full time job. They had asked me if I wanted to become an apprentice um, on one of the machines. I could have apprenticed on like I think they said, "Would you like to run a mill?" And that was like, ooh, the mill operators were, the stars of the place. And that was actually a prestigious offer. Seriously, it was. But I was in college, getting a college education because that was the path to future success. You can see how that turned out. Okay? I got a college degree and an advanced graduate degree, and now qualified more or less to sit in a basement 3 days a week and sand down bits of plastic that were badly done, badly molded to begin with. That could have been a mill operator. I don't know if that place is still in business or not. Almost no place is anymore. So I'm gonna guess that it isn't, because that was the way of things. They get bought out, work gets shipped out. But it was a fascinating summer job. I got pretty good at sharpening drills too. You know, people on the floor would come and say, "Oh, could you sharpen this drill for me?" That one piece of metal that I talked about, where they're drilling maybe a dozen 1.5 inch holes around the circumference of it. Okay, that one, those drills needed to be, they could do like 2 holes, and then the drill needed to be sharpened again. It was that hard on the drill. That drill kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter, the drill bit. There wasn't much of it left at the end. And those were not, they bought these drill bits. It's funny calling something that's maybe 12, a foot long and an inch and a half in diameter, a drill bit, but that's what it was, just on a giant scale. Um, you know, Wanted to get their money out of it because those things were not cheap. They were hard to find and hard to replace. Now, this side is really bad in terms of the mold being misaligned. This is about how I'm going to get done. In the last 45 minutes of this stream is just sanding out all the flaws on the exhaust, which tells you what a mess it is in terms of how badly it is made. Probably should have used the coarser grit sandpaper on this. It would have moved along a little bit more quickly. Just all sorts of little shards of chrome everywhere. The side of this is so bad, I'm just going to file it off. Can't get it, can't reach it otherwise. Those, I needed to talk about something, so why not talk about a machine shop? And it's pretty cool that I'm on, worked in a place once where they got to go, where they got to experience basically all the different activities that went on in the company. There's a round one in here. If I were to look at this under the head magnifier, I'd probably be grumping even more about how messy it is. This isn't round. This is another one of those things where I can guarantee that after I prime it, after the priming is done, there will be yet more sanding. You just know it's going to be the case. Whoa, that's not good. Where the sprue was attached, I thought I had gotten that, but I obviously had not. Okay. I'm getting a lot of the chrome off, which is good, because the chrome just, the paint doesn't stick to it very well. So I think I've got the seams pretty well down. Not the seams, but they're sort of seams. They're the part where the molds didn't come together. And so it leaves a ridge where the plastic oozed out between the two halves of the molds, which is why I've been spending so much time rubbing at this with sandpaper to get them off, to make them go away. Because they're very, very obvious. Right up here, there's more. And the exhaust is supposed to be metal tubes, not, and the metal tubes do not have little ridges on them. They just don't. And so That all needed to be sanded away. So I think this part will be able to go with the rest of them to be primed after maybe some additional. Well, these need to be sanded, and these need to be sanded, and that needs to be sanded. So on Wednesday, I'll be doing some sanding, and maybe if I'm brave, I will, at the beginning of the stream, attempt to do some assembly of the front suspension, which needs to be done. I mean, I can't keep avoiding it forever. Well, I can probably just abandon this project to say, oh, well, there's a bunch of parts that'll never be put together. I could probably do that, but I won't. I will make an effort to assemble the parts and make them look, they might not operate. The steering might not work when all is said and done. I don't know. I'm going to try to get it to work, but okay, well, it looks a lot better in the raw plastic than it did when it was covered in chrome. The last little bits aren't going away. Okay. So this stream, complete with almost losing my PG-13 rating earlier today, is brought to you by Dyson Dungeons, which is a group of family and friends that runs the most amazing Dungeons and Dragons show. And if you haven't seen it, you need to. Catch some episodes on YouTube. Become a fan and watch them all and learn to love our characters. Get into the spirit of the show and the sort of plot points, and occasionally, like the last couple of episodes, some interesting and fun retail fantasy shopping. Yeah, do that. And just keep in mind that this stream is a spin-off of that because of dungeon tiles and minifigs that then appear in our show. So if you can become a follower, that would be terrific. You can go onto YouTube and become a subscriber. And you can even go to patreon.com/dice and dungeons, patreon.com/dice and dungeons, become a patron and help support all the little bits of things that go into the show. How am I going to get the inside of that? Can't tell because of the shininess whether that's going to be okay or not. It's going to run the file along here. How much time? I've got like 3 minutes left. So yes, please do that. Let everybody you know, let total strangers know. Stop people in the street and say, hey, you should check out this Dyson Dungeons thing. They have an amazing Dungeons and Dragons show. And they have a spin-off in which some old guy tries to put together models that he put together when he was a kid and is now trying to make them look not like he put them together when he was a kid. And more often than not, there's a really hilarious failure. Like he'll stick his fingers in the paint. Why not? That's just something to do. What I'm doing here is scraping off the seams that were left from the molding process. I'm using a file because I can't get the sandpaper in there. And this isn't the best way to do it because it leaves scratch marks, but it's, if you were to do this, I would recommend that you would just do your best to get the sandpaper in there rather than using the file so you don't get scratch marks everywhere that we'll show later. But that's what I did. Okay. So to recap, I hardly got anything done again. I did get some parts cemented together that will then have to be sanded down and seams gone. I filled in some holes with some putty that has to be sanded down, and these had to be reprimed. This needs to be cleaned up. This needs to be sanded. So these parts on Wednesday there'll just be some cleaning and sanding. And then on Wednesday night or Thursday before the Friday stream, I'll prime them. And then maybe have to redo them. I don't know. But I am hoping, I don't know realistically or not, I'm hoping that I will be able to do some assembly on Wednesday. The painting didn't go very well. It took an extra week almost to get the body painting done. I almost destroyed it while touching it up. A little bit of touching up needs to be done, and then I need to try to get the front suspension put together, which will be more challenging than it should be because the attachment points for the parts where they're cemented are just infinitesimally small. So I've got this box of parts that need to be assembled. Yeah, there it is. I think I'll put the seat in there too. To show you that I've got parts that have been, prepared, and they look pretty decent. Thanks everybody for joining in. I'll be back again on Wednesday with another episode of grumbling about stuff and reminiscing about factory jobs, and maybe even talking about race cars. No. On Wednesday, maybe some assembly, definitely more sanding and shaping and complaining and slowly but surely moving along. If I can get that front assembly done, it will look like I've accomplished something. And I'm really getting to the point with this model now where I need to show something more than just that. Thanks, everybody. I will see you on Wednesday, and I will promise that hardly anything will get done, but it will take a long time. See you then. Bye.